Welcome, everybody, to episode 286 of WordPress Weekly for Wednesday, August 23rd, 2017. I'm your host, Jeff Chandler, joined by J-Trip. And John, unbeknownst to some skeptics out there, some predictions, the world did not end after the total eclipse.
It didn't, no.
I mean, we're still here.
I guess we're still here. How do we know?
Yeah, how do we know?
How many Rick and Mortys are there? I'm not really sure which one, where I am, and how we're here.
Nice, that's awesome. Finally get a Rick and Morty reference on the show. That's the achievement unlocked. Oh yeah, so didn't get a chance to see Totality here. In fact, I just kind of laid in bed and watched NASA's coverage because I felt like that was one of the best views in the house, especially if you didn't get to see 100%. Totality go over your location. And I wasn't like the president where I didn't look up at the sun with my eyes. So,
well, Jeff, that's if you believe that NASA's actually telling you the truth.
Oh, okay. All right. Is that where we're going here already?
You're very trusting. Very trusting.
Unbelievable. Oh, anyways, I am happy to know that in 2024, the solar eclipse totality will go right over my house. So I'm looking forward to that.
I like that you are the totality and when that happens.
Yes, over my house. Nobody else's, just my house. That's right. Jeez, making it sound like I have an ego problem or something. I'm selfish. Anyways, great to be back with you folks, our listeners out there. Again, we don't have a guest on today's show. So we're just going to talk about the news of the week and whatever else comes to mind. And if I can make Triple J feel uncomfortable, again, achievement unlocked.
We've already got a flat Earth reference joke in like the first 5 minutes, so I feel like my job here is done.
Awesome. So let's start off with WordPress.org to add a new page educating users on the benefits of upgrading PHP. So WordPress's core PHP team has created a new GitHub organization for initiatives focused on improving the use of PHP in the project. And the first one they're tackling is a new page on WordPress.org, which will be dedicated to educating users about the benefits of upgrading PHP. Right now, contributors are collecting third-party articles and tutorials on PHP upgrades to find inspiration for the project, which is temporarily codenamed Serve Happy. Which is, I guess, it would be an appropriate name. According to WordPress's stats page, 14.2% of all the sites that it is tracking are running on PHP 7.0 and above. Now, 40.6% of sites are on PHP 5.6, which is no longer actively supported, but will receive security updates until January 2019. So this leaves almost 50% of all WordPress sites running on older, insecure PHP versions that have already reached the end of life and are no longer receiving security updates. So they're collecting a bunch of feedback, and they're going to go over the benefits one by one and really narrow them down and come up with a way to put these together on a page so that the user is not unnecessarily burdened or feels like they need to have a panic attack about should I upgrade or should I not. But this is one of the things that's been discussed and argued about year after year after year is how do we get so many websites out there running on the latest and greatest, or at least PHP 7.0 or above. And a lot of people have blamed the web host for laying back and not doing anything about it. And there are a lot of people who say that, well, users should never have to worry about which version of PHP they're using. And upgrading PHP is the PHP. When you start talking about that, I think, for a lot of people out there still, maybe their eyes glaze over. We're talking about something that's server level, and it should be taken care of at a host, I think. But GoDaddy, WP Engine, Bluehost, and some of the other major web hosting companies out there have started to work on not only upgrading their customer sites, but actually creating whole new server stacks, like a whole new segment of their network where it's PHP 7 by default. And I'll say that the Tavern, I don't know why we waited so long, but we ended up upgrading the site from PHP 5 point whatever to 7.0, and it was like a night and day difference. The back end was responsive and it was really fast. Things loaded quicker. We started to see less errors, and there was just nothing but benefits for us, and all the plugins we had and the themes that we had worked on the tavern. So it really worked out for us. And there are still compatibility issues out there for some plugins, of course, with PHP 7. But by and large, I've read that a number of WordPress sites have upgraded without any issues. And John, is this one of this PHP initiative you think will help get us to getting more than 50 or about 50% of the sites on WordPress up to a respectable version of PHP?
Well, if this doesn't do it, it would be hard to dream up something else that might actually do the same or better. I know the folks at Yoast had built something that brought in some nags into WP admin to try.
Oh yeah,
and
they said it was actually working according to
they have some results, and that's good. But it's I'm of two kind of minds on this, because I don't. If WordPress is doing everything right, and by WordPress I mean the software, the community, the web hosts that are using it as their platform of choice, and everything else, then it shouldn't matter. We really shouldn't ever care what version of PHP that anything is running on. It's like saying what version of utility poles is your neighborhood using. Like, if everything is going okay, you don't care whether or not your local electric company has replaced the utility poles at any given time with a certain type of wood or aluminum or whatever. Like, the infrastructure that WordPress ends up using is just a thing that the majority of users shouldn't have to worry about. And it's not that they shouldn't care about it. It's not that PHP isn't a great project full of its own community members and contributors that deserve attention and amazing recognition and stuff. Like, all that stuff is true, but those celebrations happen in a different place. And so trying to champion the cause for upgrading or getting people familiar with PHP versions, it's kind of I don't know. I'm not a fan of it, honestly. Personally, I think if we're doing everything right, then the version of PHP doesn't matter.
Well, there's been a lot of talk on getting WordPress, the project, to use its clout, to use its influence, to force web hosts into upgrading to PHP 7, as if they have that kind of power. And so far, the project hasn't really done that. Some hosts have taken upon themselves, as I mentioned earlier. But now we're starting to see what Yoast did with their plugin, and now with this page. It seems like now we're getting to the point where we're going to have to, if we're going to put this burden on users, then we better have a page, or we better have a way to explain why this is good, and is your site capable of doing this? That's kind of what this project is hoping to achieve with the Serve Happy page.
What web hosts are doing now by building, because it's not just PHP that is being upgraded. It's like it's the entire stack. It's the entire server environment that ends up getting the upgrade. And so when web hosts are moving people over to PHP 7, by and large, they're moving to a containerized environment that is scalable and deployable in a different environment completely. So it's not much different than what happens in the real world when you want to replace those power lines or those utility poles. What most municipalities will do, or opt to do, or try to do, or neighborhoods or subdivision developments, they'll bury the electric instead. And they'll leave the old poles there until they've sufficiently buried everything, and then just splice everything over and then get rid of the old stuff. And maybe they'll get rid of the old stuff in old places, or maybe they'll leave it. Like, if you think like how many...
Well, that's what the railroads have done. Like, the railroads used to have communications lines with the old wooden poles, but now everything is fiber optic. It's buried, it's underneath, it's under rock, it's underground. But they've left the poles there, I guess, just for nostalgic sake or something.
So those old poles still have value, because there are still people that will want to utilize the poles. It's like a causeway, or as like another place where they can hang their lines for whatever it is that they want to do. Like, they kind of end up owning the infrastructure and utility poles, and then they'll lease the space on those poles to other people that either can't afford to bury them in with the conduit or whatever else. And so all of these shared hosting environments that are on old versions of PHP, the thing with them is they're not wholly, they're totally useless. There are other PHP platforms that maybe don't need the power of PHP 7, maybe don't really care as much about being up to date with whatever security releases that are necessary. There are millions of sites that are on these old legacy platforms. Is moving them over really important? Sure. But is it any less important than moving all of the businesses and homes in the entire world over to buried electrical or the self-driving automobiles or whatever else, right? Like rolling these things out takes an enormous amount of attention and time and manpower that, if everything is all being done correctly, is kind of hidden from every other person. Every taxpayer, every contributor doesn't have to care about this stuff. And so for us, it's easy to opine about PHP 7 and 7.1 and how great and amazing that they are, how everyone should be using it. But then everyone should be burying or electric. Everyone should be using brick instead of wood. Everyone should be doing everything else that we just haven't gotten to a point where it's feasible yet. So it's good to take these baby steps. It's good to start nudging PHP and web hosts maybe in a better direction. But I think we have to still keep our or stay realistic in that these things are slow to roll out. They're gonna take time, and it's not that they're not valuable or not important. It's that it's just not easy. So,
and by and large, the shift to get web hosts and websites to upgrade to PHP 7 has been driven by developers, because developers are the ones who use and work with PHP every day. And newer versions of PHP allow for things like namespaces and performance improvements and things you can't do, and things that may be backwards incompatible with older versions. So one of the things about this initiative here is this is one way, if we're going to get end users to get involved now, along with the developers, to put the pressure on web hosts, they got to have the tools, the information, and things of that nature to be on the same page. So now we're going to have a combined effort.
Yep. The one thing that the PHP team did that I think really helped themselves get notoriety and faith and momentum or whatever else around getting other people to upgrade to PHP 7 is, syntactical namespaces and stuff like that's fine. And I get that, like, the majority of PHP developers appreciate and want those types of things in PHP. But the biggest thing that they did is make it perform exponentially better. Like, that's the thing at the end of the day that everyone mentions and talks about as the thing that made them appreciate and really start thinking and talking about upgrading to PHP 7. If you, let's say that all of a sudden
the performance increases in PHP 7 is by and large why HHVM is history.
Exactly right. When someone comes out with a new furnace for your house or air conditioner that uses 50% electricity but still manages to heat and cool your house at the exact same rate, what would you do? Maybe you didn't even need a furnace, but if the cost savings are there over time, then you just buy a new one. And so web hosts look at this and go, okay, well, if we can upgrade to PHP 7 and it's going to have less processing costs, it's going to lower our hosting costs. We can have the fans run less because the CPUs and GPUs aren't running as quickly or as long or as hard. Then, of course, PHP 7 is a no-brainer. But in order to get there, you sometimes have to upgrade the electrical around your house or upgrade the whatever other surrounding things that you've got going on. And so I think everyone kind of looked at this as the opportunity to say, okay, shared hosting was great and it definitely served its purpose at the time, but now we've got just a whole suite of better pieces of software to help complement PHP 7 and the performance that it brings. And so let's roll all of those things out. And so now you look at literally every single PHP or WordPress related web host that is kicking butt right now, between all of the popular, between GoDaddy's, Pagely's, Pantheons, Flywheels, Pressables, on up and down in every direction. They're all running PHP 7 containerized environments now, maybe with their own version of some secret sauce in it, but it's just the direction that everyone has to go. So
No, personally, we were running on PHP 5, whatever, and I'm like, last thing I'm thinking, and I've read all the articles about. I've never been inclined enough to upgrade to PHP 7, but as part of a process of upgrading the site and figuring some stuff out, we had an opportunity to upgrade the site, and then I saw, oh, that's why we needed to upgrade. Why didn't we upgrade sooner? So I didn't realize the benefits until I saw them for myself.
And how many pieces of software that get faster? Right? Like if you look at WordPress gets slower, everything gets slower because it gets bigger. It includes more things.
Right.
Like it's pretty significant that something like a decade and a half old. It's got to be almost 17 years old by now. When was it? 2002. So okay, so for any software project at the age, maturity, and everything else is PHP, to all of a sudden, kind of out of nowhere, get significantly faster is really, really cool, actually. And so that's, I think, the real motivating factor for everyone to upgrade. It's just so good.
And from PHP now to JavaScript. Last month, React users petitioned Facebook to relicense the project and its other open source project after the Apache Software Foundation added Facebook's BSD plus patents license to its Category X list of disallowed licenses for Apache PMC members. Participants and subscribers to the GitHub thread waited weeks for a decision on relicensing while Facebook's engineering directors discussed the matter internally. However, the request has now formally been denied. Now, the request for relicensing had received 851 thumbs up reactions on GitHub, and many developers commented to say that the ASF's policy disallowing the BSD plus patents license affects their organization's ability to continue using React and other open source projects from Facebook. Now, Facebook cites that meritless patent litigation was one of the primary reasons behind adopting the BSD plus patents license. So bear with me here as I read the quote. This is from Wolf's post, Adam Wolf, who's a developer at Facebook, and he says, quote, "As our business has become successful, we've become a larger target for meritless patent litigation. This type of litigation can be extremely costly in terms of both resources and attention. It would have been easy for us to stop contributing to open source or to do what some other large companies do and only release software that isn't used in our most successful products, but we decided to take a different approach. We decided to add a clear patent grant when we released software under the 3-clause BSD license, creating what has come to be known as the BSD plus patents license. The patent grant says that if you're going to use the software we've released under it, you lose the patent license from us if you sue us for patent infringement. We believe that if this license were widely adopted, it could actually reduce meritless litigation for all adopters, and we want to work with others to explore this possibility," end quote. So there's a lot of other things. Of course, a lot of developers are upset and disappointed with this decision. And of course, some of the people who have commented on this article have said, well, okay, that should be the nail in the coffin for WordPress choosing React as the core library,
but why?
JavaScript library to ship with core.
So I'm going to be controversial on the show.
Please do.
Because
I'm uncomfortable already. Sorry.
Yes. So if you read the words of the license and then you read the quote that you just read, the reality of what it means is the opposite of what everyone is upset about. And so the thing that's happening here is the thing that we have seen happen across the world right now, is that the words don't matter as much as the sentiment matters. People are looking for the perception that Facebook is cooperative. They don't know exactly or care what they're cooperating on or for. They just want to see Facebook say, "Oh yeah, we totally get it, and we're willing to cooperate." Like them looking like they are doing the air quotes right thing is what people are looking for. They want a good faith commitment that says we are not going to use our own license against you, but if you literally read the words of what the BSD patent and the exclusion clause says, that is exactly what it says. It's just people are not really comprehending the reason why there is this patent license and then the exclusion that says that if you choose to sue Facebook for the software that they are graciously letting you use for free,
which sounds stupid, there. What sounds stupid.
That you waive your rights to certain pieces of what it is that you're trying to, like. It's kind of ridiculous, actually, that any organization trying to protect themselves for the gift that they've given you is then reverse logically blamed for giving the gift in the first place. So if I gave you a beer, then if I said, hey, I'm giving you this beer, but I can't promise you it's going to taste good, and then you drink it and you go, "Buh, it tastes terrible," you don't get to then be mad at me. It's ridiculous, actually, the whole premise of why I think people are a little upset about it. But that in and of itself isn't even the problem. The problem is that Facebook as an organization should get this. They should see that the audience of people that are waiting for them to make a decision are waiting for Facebook to say, oh yeah, like we're totally willing to be cooperative, and here's the plain English version of how we plan on using this license and this exclusion clause if we ever had to. Let's walk this out in real life. This is why this is here. Let's say XYZ happens and someone sues us. Here's why this is here and here's how we're going to react to that. And anything that was plain English like that, I think would be really helpful and useful. But I also still don't think that at this point now, because this issue has escalated so far and beyond outside of what the original intent even was in the first place, that there's very much that Facebook can do about it. This issue has gotten so far out of their control that there's not a whole lot that I think that they can do about it now. And so this reminds me of like the drama that the dude from Google was in for releasing his manifesto about equality in the workplace and men and women and all that crap. Like it's terrible that that it really got as big as it got, but it's also terrible the situation that the world is in, that what he wrote is even a topic or a subject at all in the first place. Right. And so it makes it really difficult to talk about really difficult things when even just bringing up the difficult thing makes you the bad guy.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, what are they supposed to do? I don't know that there's much that they can say anymore. If they would have said it 6 months or a year ago, it might have been different. But now I think it's too late. It doesn't matter what decision that they make.
There's been some interesting comments in favor and against what Facebook, their final response is. In Russet Shadow says that, yes, Facebook is a large company, makes lots of money, but it's not any more right for them to be harassed by nuisance lawsuits than it is for you or I to be. I thought that was an interesting comment. And there's also, this thought process, like Hashim Warren says in the comments, they've made it clear that this license will be used to bludgeon companies they have sides with. And they've also made it clear that the legal folks are in charge of this policy, not the engineering team. So WordPress should not take any assurances from any React developer about how benign this license is. And again, we have a whole slew of people who, just because that clause exists, exempts it from being used in WordPress. Again, as we've mentioned before, Calypso built on React, Gutenberg is built on React. And here's the thing I wanted to ask you, which I thought was interesting. So Gutenberg is being built with React. Yep. Let's say React is not the chosen framework that is included in core, the JavaScript framework. Because Gutenberg is built on React, if it is ever merged into core, then all the other developers who want to build on top of or modify Gutenberg will probably have to do so with React. And by and large, somehow, one way or another, even without choosing it as the official framework, now we start getting more and more things built with React and WordPress, and it just sort of happens naturally.
So kind of, but the React is only one piece of this, right? Like if you imagine that what we're dealing with here is sort of a front end pizza, then React is sort of just one piece of this pizza. It's the cheese, or it might be an important part, a delicious part of this, but if it turns out that it's not the right ingredient for the WordPress pizza, then there is Vue or Preact or some other I guess more.
I guess right now it's just the right ingredient for Gutenberg.
Yeah. Yep. And so this is the thing that makes it that everyone, well, and not only that, but it's the thing that is the most popular. It's the thing that has the most momentum behind it. I mean, between React and other tools that are around it and Redux and everything else, it is getting used. And like we joke about 28% of the web, and we look at plugins that have millions of installations or that get downloaded tens of thousands of times per month. But like Redux gets downloaded 3 million times a month. Like these are bigger projects that are involved in bigger, much more reaching things than what WordPress is sort of accustomed to. So the reason that React is an obvious choice for a lot of people is literally because it's like it's like paper. Like you're going to write things down on paper. You're not going to write them down on a piece of wood anymore. And so paper comes out, oh, we can all just write stuff down on paper. React is like, it is the clear and obvious choice. But if all of a sudden the paper company says, well, the price of paper is going up, people are going to start to want to write on wood again, and because they can't afford the paper.
I want to chisel on stone.
Exactly. And so the React is a pretty obvious choice for pretty much everybody, but with the clause that's there, it freaks people out, rightfully so, and so people look for alternatives, and it's important that there are alternatives. And the nice thing is that today most of those alternatives are kind of feature for feature they are in parity with one another in a nice kind of way. So you can just replace the React part of this with something else, and with not a lot of work, relative work, these things are abstracted out. So it's nice that there are alternatives, but it is unnecessarily scary, and in a way that I have a hard time really rationalizing it, because I don't think that admittedly, maybe I just haven't done it as much research as other people have, but I feel like I've researched this as deep as I care to at this point. And it just seems like there's a lot of commotion over something that really doesn't mean a whole lot anymore. So I don't know. Guess we'll see. Thing about the WordPress side of it with Gutenberg and everything else, I guess, to answer your actual question, because I feel like maybe I didn't, is that it ultimately won't matter if something else has to replace React or the React part in the stack. Then it should be able to happen without a lot of problems. But the interesting part of it is that the GPL and is being the type of license that it is, where it is sort of viral in a way, would kind of mean that it is very possible that you could build something that relies on something that relies on something that relies on something, and find yourself suddenly in a bizarre place where you are unknowingly out of compliance with some license for some reason. Kind of no different than if you start digging holes in your own yard, and you find yourself out of compliance with having dug too close to your neighbor's yard, or a fence, or a building, or some other thing. Like there are
hit a water pipe.
There are rules.
In my case, I hit a gas line.
Did you really? Oh
no! I'm just kidding. That's what I would do.
I accidentally took the rototiller through the cable line, the internet that came to the house, because it looked like the root of a tree. I thought it was just a tree root. I actually brought my wife over, like, does this look, it looks like a root, right? And I kind of tugged on it. I was like, well, Yeah, it's probably fine. It wasn't. I learned how to patch a coaxial cable that day, and was happy that Radio Shack happened to still be in business at the time. But long story short, it'll be okay. But you can find yourself in a funny spot, which I think is maybe what people are worried about is the unknown part of what could theoretically happen. But until something does happen, it's a lot of wasted time to talk about the things that could happen in the future. Let's talk about what's happening now, which is we're trying to make the web a better place while we can. So
speaking of things that are happening now, ThemeBeans founder Rich Taber released Merlin WP on GitHub in public beta this week. This is a cool project, actually. It provides a beautiful experience for installing and setting up WordPress themes with all of their plugin dependencies, customizer settings, widgets, demo content, and more. And Taber says that he was inspired by David Baker's Envato theme setup wizard, and he was working to add it to his own themes, but he pivoted after realizing that he was putting a Band-Aid on the onboarding issues surrounding themes in particular. Says it wasn't particularly a grand experience and didn't take care of the essentials the way he was looking for. So if you use Merlin WP, it comes with a content.xml file where it exports demo content using the WordPress exporter, widgets.wie, which exports widgets using the widget importer and exporter, and customizer.dat, which exports customizer settings using customizer export and import. Merlin WP also works seamlessly with TGMPA, which is a PHP library that many WordPress developers use to require or recommend plugins for their themes and plugins. And if you take a look at the demo video, which we'll have a link to in the show notes here, it's really cool. You go through the screen, so it says install child theme, click a button, child theme's installed. This says let's install some plugins. So you click the button, these plugins get installed for you automatically, and then it imports your posts and your content. And by the time you're done with this setup wizard, you have a site that looks just like demo. And that's probably one of the most common support requests that theme authors or theme developers have is, how do I make my site look like the demo? And this is something I've struggled with over the years is, you go window shopping for a theme, you have an idea in your head, and just getting the theme to look like the demo after you install it. For me, it gets to the point where, hey, I can't get it to look like the demo. How the hell am I going to get it to look like anything I have in my head? Because the demo part was my starting ground. Anyways, it's really cool. He's open source this now. He says that he's working on a few issues here before he releases it to the public as a full-fledged product. But it is available on GitHub, GPL license, and it's available for any developer to use in their open source projects. Taber says that he's considering creating a pro version, but is not currently interested in pursuing an add-on model. So one of the things we've talked about before, John, is these things called onboarding wizards, whether it be for plugins or themes. And this Merlin WP looks pretty cool.
Sure does. It's a funny spot because it's such a niche audience. I think it's really geared and towards the medium, small sized WordPress add-on store, shop, plugin seller that doesn't want to do all of those surrounding pieces of work. So it's a tight, small sort of market. So it looks well done. It looks really cool. TGMPA is cool. So it's a lot of work that goes into making something like this actually, function, number one, but hopefully succeed and stay profitable. So it'll be cool to see what happens next.
Taber said his target distribution channel is commercial themes, of course, but he believes that Merlin WP could also be useful for themes hosted on WordPress.org. However, he's not sure if it's allowed, and that's something he's going to have to work with the plugin review team with on to see if it would be allowed. So he's working on that, and it's going to be the onboarding wizard will be part of all of his products on ThemeBeans.com. So if you purchase a theme from ThemeBeans, you'll be able to see it in person.
That's cool.
That's pretty neat work there. And it wouldn't be a WordPress Weekly without talking about, well, we've already said Gutenberg, but now we're going to really talk about Gutenberg. Over the past few months, reviews of Gutenberg have trended towards a love-hate relationship without little room in between. But to figure out why this is, Millie McDonald and Anna Harrison of, I guess you would call it Epochs. I guess Epochs, right? But they're the company behind Tiny MCE. And they actually analyzed the feedback of Gutenberg so far and concluded that many of the issues people are having likely stem from timing. So I'll do Harrison says, quote, "In short, the nuances and the micro interactions and timing of UI elements in Gutenberg are a little out of sync with what the user is doing at a point in time. For example, a user typing in a new paragraph is distracted when the decoration of the previous paragraph turns on," end quote. And one of the common pieces of feedback is that Gutenberg's UI is clean, but it's also cluttered, which is like, okay, how could it be one and the other at the same time? So they actually recorded a video of a user test between Gutenberg and Medium's editor, and the video was very telling. You could see them adding the title, pasting a couple of different paragraphs, and I could just tell just from the video that Medium's interface was far superior, something that I think would gel with me better than what we currently have in Gutenberg. And I just thought it was really good. She presented, the team over at Epochs presented all of their findings and suggestions to Gutenberg's development team. I thought it was a really neat way to see feedback. The development team was very appreciative of that. But what do you think of just the they call them microtransactions, or these nuances in the UI, and the fact that timing is important as to when things display?
It's
like when should the toolbar display? When should the plus button display for adding new blocks? When should all these different things display? And it should sync up with your behavior at that time.
I think these are all little things that that are all pretty obvious, honestly. But finding the words and the way to communicate those things is really, really nuanced and really, really difficult. Like, you can tell, when something is convenient and it works good and is nice and you like it, but it is not typical to be able to explain exactly why you like it, because it only took 1 second versus 2 seconds to do something, or because the corners were rounded instead of square, or because something was easy to click or not easy to click, or it's because you go into the cafe and you like that the line aims one way instead of the other way, or you don't want to stand in front of the freezer because you get cold if you're there for too long because it takes 5 minutes to actually order a latte or whatever, right? Like, there are lots of little optimizations in the world that you can look at and go like, oh, of course, like that is very obvious to me now that you've pointed it out. But we can all tell when it's a frustrating experience, but it's not real easy to be able to explain why and then be able to do that in a way that inspires others to be better. And so that's what I think the takeaway from the folks over at, I would say EFOX, but I apparently, I'm from the Midwest, where I over enunciate everything very phonetically. But the blog post from them was just brilliant. I mean, it was really nice to see them getting involved and contributing to like their passion for making a really good editor on the web goes beyond Tiny MCE in the same way that like our passion for freedom of expression and writing stuff on the web goes beyond WordPress. Like, for them to jump in and say, yeah, like, it's cool that you're building this like direct competitor to pretty much everything that we've invested our entire careers in. And here's a way that we think you might be able to make your competitive thing even better, right? Like, it's great. It's like the spirit of all of the things that make you want to continue to like Tiny MCE and the group behind it, and really proves where their priorities and everything are. It's
so have you written any content in Gutenberg yet?
I've only written testing it out. I have not tried to use it. I have not taken the training wheels off of it yet myself. No.
All right, I want to read you a couple other of the key takeaways from their analysis of Gutenberg, and maybe you just say agree or disagree. But the first one is, right now, menus pop up when we are trying to type. They ought to pop up when we are trying to do something to words that have already been typed. Agree or disagree?
Oh gosh, I totally agree. Like any web editor, like any editor, Keynote is like, stay out of my face until I'm done. Yeah, for sure. Totally agree.
Keyboard navigation is needed to prevent breaks in flow. In particular, enter to create a new default type block and tab or arrows to navigate between blocks.
So I agree, but I think most users point and click. I think they highlight a word and click bold, or they highlight a thing. I think
that's what I used to do, or I highlight and do a keyboard shortcut. That's what I do.
And I think because I spend most of my day in a code editor like NetBeans or Atom or something else, that I'm pretty accustomed to shift, command, control, function, arrow key up, down, and highlighting text and using shortcut keys. But I do not believe that your average user of a computer is like that at all. Like you and we write all the time. We are playing a piano. Other people are not playing the keys the way that we do. So I agree, but that's not super critical, I don't think. But yeah, I do agree. Not real, not.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Next one. I feel like David Letterman here, like a top 10. When typing in a block, all decorations from previous blocks should disappear.
Agree. Totally. 100%.
This will reduce the distraction that a user senses when typing.
I guess it depends on what you consider to be like the decoration or
I'd say the outline, the gear icon, stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree. That's
the ability to move a block up and down.
And that's how every product from Adobe, Photoshop, Illustrator, any piece of software that has multiple, layers or whatever you'd want to call them, Pro Tools, Logic, any audio editing, everything. When you focus on a thing, you get some version of an inspector. When you click off the thing, that inspector goes away, or all the flashy selected chromey type stuff disappears. So yeah, totally 100% agree.
Here's a nuanced one for you. Block decoration should not appear on mouse over, only on block selection. Again, this will reduce the distraction and heaviness that users report right now.
So I think that I agree, because that is, again, how most pieces of software actually work. But this might be different in the way that what we're dealing with in Gutenberg is actually relatively less complicated than a piece of software like Adobe Illustrator or something else, where you don't want to hover over 1 million layers. But in Gutenberg, you could maybe have a very subtle mouse over effect to help with targeting, because otherwise it's just a big white empty slate canvas where you have no idea what the clickable target area is for any one of those blocks. And so we'll see what happens there. I could see something more subtle.
Menu should not appear on mouse over or on block selection, only on text selection, which they agreed this probably needs wider discussion.
I think it does need wider discussion, because it depends on exactly what the menus are for and what the context of the component is. There are some where I could imagine needing a menu right off the bat because I don't know what to do next. And there are others where I do know what to do next, and so the menu isn't real important until I absolutely need it. So I'll have to see.
Last but not least, insert menu should appear on a new line, not be permanently visible under the paragraph that is being typed, which they also believe needs wider discussion.
I think it needs wider discussion, but I think I'd probably agree. The flow is top down, left to right, and so to have anything out of place from there it breaks the flow for me specifically. So I agree.
So there we go. All right.
See, look at this. It's like we did have a guest on the show with interview questions.
Yeah, there we go. All right. Last but not least, Morten Rand Hendrickson, who we've had on the show before, did an awesome topic about telemetry and data, tracked usage data. He finally got a lot of his thoughts out about what Gutenberg means for the future of WordPress. It's a great
post.
Yeah, I thought so as well. Rand Hendrickson considers Gutenberg to be a watershed moment. Quote, he says, "This is a revolution. This is a watershed moment for WordPress. This is entirely new and fundamentally different from how WordPress works and how we work with it today. I cannot overstate it enough when I say this changes everything," end quote. He goes on to suggest that Gutenberg will allow WordPress to graduate from being a blogging platform to a platform for managing views. If Gutenberg adds complexity to the user interface, though, he predicts that many users may migrate to simpler hosted publishing platforms that are just dedicated to blogging. Hopefully when Gutenberg is done, those issues are addressed, where everybody can use it, not just, for bloggers, for content writers, store owners, what have you. And one of the things I liked about his post is the optimism part, because I thought it was neat to think about. But he says, quote, whatever happens to WordPress's user base once Gutenberg is implemented fully, WordPress's role in the wider web and internet community will change. If all these things actually work and people find them useful, WordPress will herald in a new age of UI and UX exploration. Applications have followed WordPress's lead before and will do it again if the new solution works, end quote. And he goes on to say some other things about the future of WordPress, REST API, and how that is all related. I really encourage you to read his entire post because it provides a lot of food for thought. But maybe, John, with your outlook and you're filled with optimism all the time. What did you take away from his post, especially about this bit about if everything works, if Gutenberg is, it's just it's a home run for WordPress and for everybody that uses it, what the ripple effect could be for other applications and the web in general.
I agree. We've seen other applications come and go, and everyone has a tendency to really get a lot of influence from one another. And I'll use the pretty typical Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat type of group of apps where everyone is starting to build a lot of flourish around icons and graphics and stories and lots of video, lots of augmented reality type integrations into things to make it more fun and enjoyable. And these things happen. Some other company says that's pretty cool. Let's build our own version of that. And then they do. Like we all want to be a part of what everybody else thinks is fun and works really well. And the block-based editor is a thing that started mostly with Medium. I think the team over at Ghost has done a really good job of mirroring that and also taking it kind of next level, even with like multiple cursor editing and like really neat stuff that was just not in the web before. So
remember Crazy Horse, and the back end interface was redesigned to where we had the left column and then you do stuff in the right column, and then you hit your top admin bar, and how after Crazy Horse was implemented, we started to see that same kind of UI structure in other software projects
all over the place. I mean, and Slack still uses a similar interface for that. Even like Mattermost, other open source projects do, and GitLab did for a really long time until they switched to a more single column layout like GitHub has. But
Drupal kind of picked up on it soon afterwards.
Yep, and what's funny is even like PHP-BB had a left-hand column in the admin a long, long time ago, but it just wasn't simplified the way that WordPress's was. WordPress made it it really forced the constraints on developers and anyone that was contributing to WordPress to just have two levels of menus there. There is no, deep hierarchy. And so that purposeful design constraint and decision was enforced across many other projects. And so the same thing can happen here. People are writing differently on the web. And in the same way that a WYSIWYG editor or even just having fonts on a computer 30 years ago was a big undertaking, and so if draggable, droppable, editable, rearrangeable content blocks is a hit, then it is going to be the new hit that we're going to wish that we had in lots of other different places if it happens to be as effective as historically a lot of other WordPress's things have been. So I wanted
to get your take on this. Rand Hendrickson talks about permanent fracture, and he says, quote, the introduction of the REST API in Gutenberg will likely lead to permanent fractures and possibly sharding off between different segments within the WordPress community and user base. As over time, this may lead to an actual fracturing of the single one-size-fits-all entity called WordPress into multiple custom solutions with a common database and UI interaction base. And he believes that such a fracturing of the community would be detrimental, but he also thinks it is inevitable, end quote. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we've been talking about this for a long time, though. This is like one of those things that it's this. It's like I guess I kind of agree, but it's like an end of the world scenario. Like we
We're
can
not
all
talking
imagine.
about a straight up fork here.
Maybe, and even if we are, even if he's being subtle, he what version of this that I see happening is now that WordPress has more of the web, now that there's more contributors, now that there's more people, is that decisions become more polarizing. And so if WordPress's mantra of decisions over options still holds true, and I believe that it does, that a decision that is as big as changing the primary editor is polarizing. And so people will love it and people will hate it. And the people that hate it may disappear and then they may come back, or they may be future contributors because they hate it so much that they want to make it better. You never really know how people are going to react or respond, and you hope that they're going to respond positively. And so for multi-site, for BuddyPress, for forums, whatever else, I think we've all been pretty lucky that people are passionate about those things, and so they rely on them, they use them, they build companies around them, everything else. But Gutenberg, I don't know that it's going to necessarily be as big of a niche as that. It may be polarizing or more so, but and on the REST API side of it, or on the back end side of it, and this is the part of it that I just had a conversation with some non-WordPress developer friends about, where if we're doing this right, that for every RESTful interface that gets built on top of WordPress's API is also a RESTful interface that could work on top of any other API. And so the person who builds a generic WP admin that happens to look and feel a lot like WordPress, but doesn't really care necessarily about what the endpoints are for each one of the specific things behind it, like with something like Calypso, for example, you could take Calypso, fork it, and build a Drupal or a Django UI using Calypso with not a ton of work, because that RESTful abstraction purposefully makes that easy. And so if we're lucky, then the REST API, and maybe this is more what Morten is trying to allude to, is that with a Gutenberg-specific RESTful API in WordPress core would allow for a bunch of other variations on what a block-based editor could potentially look like, up to and including native applications that are not JavaScript or web-based, where you build a really neat Mac OS or Android application that knows how to interface with the blocks on the back end and then has its own version of a UI on top of it. I think we're years away from that, but that's the magic that exposing those API endpoints could reveal. And so if we're all good magicians, then we're kind of making sure that the secrets are kind of trade secrets, but at the same time, we want to make sure that people are enjoying the illusions that are presented to them. And so I don't know that it will fragment things as much as it will be another opportunity for people to leverage a piece of what's happening here in really, really, really neat ways. So I guess we'll see.
In response to the article, I covered the article, shared it on the Tavern, and Matt Mullowick has actually been responding to a number of the comments on the article, and I think it'd be kind of neat to highlight just a few of them here on the show. And some people have brought up the issue of automatic, or not automatic, but automatic was brought up, but not in what I'm about to tell you. But with regards to WordPress being for blogging, and Matt Mullowick says, I think the biggest benefit of Gutenberg will be to people using WordPress as a CMS. He says, in fact, I'm a little concerned that the visual and cognitive overhead of how it works today might be intimidating for people who just want to blog, but I think we'll be able to address that in the next few beta iterations, end quote. So, I mean, that's definitely a concern that's on his radar. That's something they're going to work towards. I mean, we're looking at, yeah, sure, it says beta software, but it might be alpha-based software, but there's still a lot of iterations, a lot of development that's still yet to go with Gutenberg. And I
still am holding pretty fast to that. If Gutenberg lands in core, and if there is any concern about it, that it'll end up being post only. It'll just be add new post, and that'll be Gutenberg, but add new page will look the same.
And the other thing I wanted to mention, Matt Mullenweg says that Gutenberg is a plugin today and will stay one until he is convinced that it is beneficial for WordPress to have it in core. I mean, that's very important for people to hear and understand. It's not just willy-nilly guaranteed to be in core. And he says that many of the concerns or worries with today's version of Gutenberg, he actually shares. The main difference seems to be some people think because it's not ready yet, we should stop working on it. And I see today's imperfect state as just a point on the journey that Gutenberg will have over the next decade of being a fundamental building block for how people publish on the web. What do you think of that comment?
I want to spin this back around because let's imagine.
Wait, are you being Mr. Controversial again?
No.
Okay,
I'm going to wrap this all up actually, because
Thank you.
If everybody's friend Mark Zuckerberg made a similar comment about the BSD license for React, I think a lot fewer people would be upset. So we can be critical of Matt as much as we may want to, but it's comments like this and his attitude towards these things and being real open that I think is largely comforting for a lot of people. And it makes these things feel less intimidating than maybe they could be, not to minimize them, but to make other people feel comfortable with it. And so if it's on the Tavern or any place else, I've always liked that Matt has no problems jumping in and being a part of the conversations when he thinks that he can make everybody a little bit more comfortable. So I think it's really great.
Yeah, and this is an uncharted territory for him. He experienced pretty much the same kind of friction when he was working on MP6 during those days. In fact, a lot of the friction was coming from members of the core team.
I was a hater. With MP6, I was a total hater about it because I really liked the semi-flat UI that WordPress had at the time. I've totally gotten used to the way that it looks now, but I really liked the old PNG icons, and I thought Ben Dunkel and everyone did a really good job with the old iconography and design and stuff. But
one of the biggest benefits of MP6 is that it made the back end responsive.
That too, that was a big deal, and it's gotten so much better over time since then. But it didn't need to be flat to be responsive, but it did help a lot. So
anyways, yeah, Matt, it's really cool to see him being part of the conversation here, responding to a lot of the comments. And also seeing that, hey, a lot of the concerns that people have, whether it be meta boxes or how you use it, just for blogging, there's the same of the concerns he has. And that's something I have, and I've always thought of in the back of my head is that, look, he's a smart guy. WordPress has gotten really far under his leadership, and he knows as much as anybody that meta boxes are extremely important and custom fields are extremely important to how developers and everybody uses WordPress and extends upon it. And he knows all about the user interface, and he talks to WordPress people on planes everywhere he goes. He talks to WordPress people, and he mentioned this in the comment where he says, yeah, they enjoy using WordPress, but then they get to the part where they talk about how they're not quite happy with the editing experience or the content creation experience, whether that's because of the way short codes work or the visual editor mangles up code that they have to only do in the text editor. And that's some of those complaints are all they're working towards solving those problems with Gutenberg, because with the blocks, well, there's no more short codes. There's no more having to paste in mangled HTML or JavaScript code, and there's only one interface for publishing all those things. And a lot of meta boxes actually could be replaced with blocks, and that's the future we're looking towards. And if that becomes the case, maybe teaching people how to use WordPress, maybe it opens up a whole new market or opportunities or possibilities for people to pick up on WordPress that maybe even today, even though that we enjoy the right user interface, maybe it's still too technical and too much of a hurdle for people. Maybe Gutenberg will lower that hurdle for a lot of people. That's yet to be seen, but that would be cool if that's the case.
The thing about editing and writing is it needs to be fun, and it's intimidating to just
the software needs to get out of your way and help you at the opportune times.
Yep. And if blocks and dragging and dropping and inserting stuff makes it fun and easy and interactive a little bit more, and if that's the direction that we're going with everything, and that the web enables that, then there's no reason we shouldn't do it. Like we've been writing books, novels for a really long time that are mostly just words, and we built the web to be hypertext, right? Make it easy to insert images and design stuff at the same time, and so it takes iterations and working on it, but now seems like the time to introduce a newer, better posting UI. So I'm all about it.
I mean, do you think that Morton's description of Gutenberg, if it would be added into core, would be a watershed moment for WordPress? Is that too much hype? Is that overstated? Because I think it's a huge milestone marker. If the editing, the experience, changes, the one place where everybody interacts with WordPress changes.
It will be for us because we're passionate about it.
But for so many other people, it will be their first interact. It'll be how they first began using WordPress.
Yeah, and so it may be the thing that attracts many people to writing with it, and it may be the reason why people choose to move away. And for as soon as WordPress ships with Gutenberg packaged in it, that day will be a plugin in the repository that disables Gutenberg and brings you back to the old editor, right? Like,
yeah, it's going to happen.
And that's okay.
And that's okay.
We want that freedom to be able to choose. And so I agree that it's a watershed moment, but I think I think it'll be another Tuesday, just like every other Tuesday also. So
all right. Well, that's I don't have any picks this week. So I guess if I was gonna have a pick this week, it would have been that Merlin WordPress onboarding wizard. However, you have a pick this week, so you're better than I.
I have a pick that has nothing to do with WordPress, at least yet. So it's kind of not really a great pick, but I am going to talk about it anyways because I installed a piece of software and am now using this on like a regular basis. And because it kind of blew my mind, I wanted to talk about it on the show. So thank you for, letting me talk about a non-WordPress related thing. But there's an open source project started or at least currently mostly supported by a gentleman by the name of Nick Farina. And looking into it, it's a fork of another piece of software, at least largely inspired by something else, but it's a project called Homebridge. And so Homebridge is an open source piece of software that lets you interact with Apple's HomeKit API. And so it doesn't sound that incredible, except that it has a huge ecosystem of plugins behind it, no different than WordPress has plugins behind it. And so people have written plugins for Nest or for your Hue lights or for whatever it is that you want to automate within your home. And so if something doesn't come with native HomeKit support, Homebridge running on like a Raspberry Pi or something else will let you hook up all of your things together and automate them using the HomeKit API. And so I was really frustrated because I have a Nest thermostat, but the Nest thermostat didn't show up in the HomeKit interface. And so you can't set rules or automations or anything. And so because Nest is a Google wholly owned property at this point, it's kind of seemed unlikely that they would ever interact with Apple's HomeKit API, or it's been years and they haven't bothered with it yet. And so it was like pretty straightforward to install. It was really cool to set up and make work. And it is kind of pretty seamless in experience, other than going in command line and installing it and all the other garbage that you're forced to do. But as an open source project that's got hundreds of forks and thousands of stars, it was like nice to see something that is this influential and kind of fills a gap that worked really super well, that takes all of your automated home related things and then plugs them all in. And then because it has an API that it exposes, let's imagine a world where maybe you can turn your lights on and off within your WP admin, right? Like I know Bo Liebens wrote a Nest interaction. He has a plugin called Keyring that I've used before and recommend highly. And if we can start bolting something like Keyring together with your Homebridge Raspberry Pi, you could start to do really cool stuff like trigger the lights at your home whenever someone comments on your blog. Like there's a lot of opportunity there for like really cool things. So I wanted to talk about Homebridge to, give it some props and exposure and say thanks to the developer and the team behind it, because I definitely have enjoyed using it, and it solved a lot of weird little problems that I was having, and it's neat. So I want to look this up quick while I'm staring at it.
I should do that. I should set up a light that has an API or bridge or Wi-Fi, and
that would be cool, right?
Tie it into the tavern where it's a red light and it blinks every time I have a comment that's in moderation, and the light would probably never stop blinking.
So it's Apache licensed. I think it runs on a Node.js server. Actually, I can read the blob here. Homebridge is a lightweight Node.js server you can run on your home network that emulates the iOS HomeKit API. It supports plugins, which are community-contributed modules that provide a basic bridge from HomeKit to various third-party APIs provided by manufacturers of smart home devices. And so now you can, tell Siri to turn on the coffee maker or, whatever you would want to do. So that's my pick this week is Homebridge.
Yeah, home automation here on WordPress Weekly.
Now, if only we had WordPress automation where someone could write on my blog for me, then we would be all set.
Yeah, there you have it. So that's going to do it for this week's episode of WordPress Weekly. You can find show notes for this episode and all previous episodes on WPTavern.com. And I'm still on Twitter, so you can follow me on Twitter at Jeffro, JEFFR0. And John?
Yeah, don't follow me on Twitter at JJJ. Instead, follow me on GitHub at JJJ.
Wow, that's where the awesome sauce is.
I'm deep in the WP Options API right now, so I'm not going to come up for air on Twitter until I have
nice knowing you.
WP Options. Yep. Bye. I guess maybe we'll see. Are you going to WordCamp Grand Rapids this weekend?
No, I'm not.
No.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. As far as WordPress, I don't have any events on my calendar until US. So I don't know. Okay. We'll see. Might be something in between here and there. But everybody else, listeners out there, if you enjoy the show, if you don't enjoy the show, write us a review on iTunes and let us know. We'd love to. It's been a while since we've read a review on iTunes, so be sure to stop by, tell us what you think of the show, and we'll read it on the air. Which, by the way, I had a dream the other night where it became a meme where I just read off terrible reviews of our show every week, and it just became a thing. I don't know why I was dreaming of that, but I thought it'd be kind of funny if that actually happened. But please don't write us terrible reviews unless you really think we're terrible.
Feedback is important, Jeff. If people don't like us, I guess it's important that we know that.
Yeah. And it's important that everybody knows that.
Right. Yes. Right. We definitely want to talk about how terrible everyone thinks we are. It's transparency, right? That's in the interest of full transparency. We should make sure everyone knows how bad that we are at this, right?
Exactly.
I mean, you're better at this than I am. I just giggle in the background mostly. And so...
All right, so everybody, enjoy the rest of your week. We'll talk to you again next Wednesday afternoon. So long, everybody.
Bye, y'all.